Excuse me. City gin. Nothing too strong. Anyway, now on to our next wonderful person, which is Lawrence Kaufman. Wait till I tell you all his story. This is going to take... slow down, John. Thank you. There we go. Lawrence Kaufman. He caught the 3D bug when he was very young and has been taking 3D photos since around 1973. A member and past president of the LA 3D Club, former president and former chairman of the National Stereoscopic Association. You wonder why he's former. Did they throw him? No, because he's so good that just by being in those organizations, they were improved, and he had to move on to other things. Former president of the International Stereoscopic Union, and he's on the board of 3D Space. He's also a card-carrying member of the Doodyville Historical Society, the original Howdy Doody fan club. So we're really happy to have him with us today, and he'll be answering your questions in the after party. And now we're going to go to the what we created during this week, and I'm going to ask him some questions afterwards. So, howdy, Heiser.
Say, kids, what time is it?
The 1950s 3D craze covered movies, comic books, and promotional advertising. Howdy Doody debuted on television on December 27, 1947. You can still find story view slides and true view film strips and cards which feature Howdy in 3D, but it's very difficult to find the 3D Howdy Doody Premium from Fifth Avenue candy bars, which we will be discussing later. There were about 50 3D comic books released beginning the summer of 1953 until early 1954. These were even more short-lived than the 3D movies had been. They used red cyan anaglyph glasses for viewing. Three-dimension comics featuring Mighty Mouse, an oversized comic book with a September date, had 1.25 million copies printed and was on the stands by July 3rd, 1953. With a 25-cent price compared to a regular 4-color comic book at 10 cents, it immediately had a 100% sell-through at a time when normal print run for comic books was under 300,000. Another 1.25 million regular-sized issues were printed with an October 1953 date. Almost every comic book publisher jumped on the 3D bandwagon. Harvey Publications had produced some of the better 3D comic books. Unfortunately, by the end of 1953, the 3D comic book saturation, 3D saw only about a 19% sell-through. 3D Love and 3D Romance only had about a 10% sell-through. Most 3D comic books were produced using acetate cells with different layers of art produced and placed on top of other layers. The layered art was pin registered with slight moves to create a left and right view. The final printed image, the different views were printed in complementary colors to be able to separate the images with 3D colored glasses. Many publishers also produced foreign language versions of the comics. Fast forwarding to the 1980s for a moment, to mention the new way to make 3D comic art is by the cut and shift method. Our friend, the late great Ray Zone, demonstrates this, which could give an even deeper appearance of depth. Now 3D art is produced on a computer. Back to the 1950s, Leonard Marr, with his brother Norman and Joe Cooper, had invented the 3D process and produced the St. John 3D comic books. Leonard told Ray Zone, the 3D advertising business was pretty good for a couple of years. And he also said, we had a hand in the production of the Tarzan 3D card series published by Topps Bubblegum, along with a number of interesting 3D posters and marketing brochures. Then, after the death of 3D comic books, 3D premiums became popular. You can still find many of these for sale. Disney produced 3 sets of 8 mini comic books, a total of 24, available inside boxes with Cheerios cereal. Always available on eBay in the $25 range or more. One item that is very rare is a Howdy Doody 3D Premium that was distributed by Luden's Fifth Avenue Candy Bar. The 3D comic was created and produced by Harvey Information Press Incorporated, the division started by Harvey Publications for 3D premium and advertising. Once you sent off for your 3D Howdy Doody comic, you waited for the oversized envelope to arrive, which included the one-sided 8-panel sheet and one pair of anaglyph glasses. Here also is a comparison with the Harvey 3D glasses. Owners were encouraged, for more fun, cut up each box and make your own strips. No wonder you can't find these today. The 3D was created with 5 acetate layers and a craft tint backer, the same way the Harvey comics were created. Here's our all 6 layers and the combined frame compared with the original rough art. And the complete strip with that final image for viewing with anaglyph. Next, we'll have a stereo pair of panel E, frame 4, and finally, a cross-eyed view.
There are so many honest questions about Howdy and Doody and his life, and how that whole thing splintered. Okay, oh, I promise that's the last one, at least for the next 5 minutes. Thank you. That is really so. It's so interesting to know about how that history kind of ties in. It's a really interesting time from like early 50s to late 50s, between 3D and everything else. They must have thought, what else could you invent? And then we came along. I think I was invented in about 56. Anything before that, I was a molecule on a mission. But can we turn on your microphone over there, Lawrence? We could unmute.
Yep,
Lawrence.
There you go.
Thank you very much. I've got a few questions for you, and I'm sure everybody else does, but too bad for them. They'll catch up with you later. Mo Howard had some kind of, there was some connection. Yeah, because I recall when we went through this the first time. How is Mo Howard involved in any of this at all?
Mo's daughter, Joan Howard, married Norman Maurer, who did the 3D St. John 3D Three Stooges comic books. Also, Norman went on to produce the feature-length Three Stooges movies that weren't in 3D.
Figure that one out. Now, was that, did he meet Mo? That was when were they married? Before or after the Stooge event?
Before the 3D, but the Stooges started forever.
Oh, right, but so he, in other words, Maurer met. See if I can get this out. Maurer met Mo after or before the marrying of Mo's daughter. Sister. Sorry.
Norman Maurer married Joan. They dated and married, and that's when he met Mo, and then he went on to work with the Three Stooges.
That probably doesn't mean much to anybody else, but I always like Stooge information, because basically, besides my parents, the TV and the Stooges, I was raised on, Mo, Larry, and Curly. Yeah, exactly. But now, wasn't that out now? I love the entrepreneurship of that. So Maurer, he saw the potential in 3D. Now, how did he pick the characters? How did that? I know DC was somehow involved in the lawsuit or something. How did that all transpire? Out of curiosity.
The Joe Kubert had been stationed in Germany, and he saw some anaglyph magazines that had photographs and the glasses. And when they came back, he came back and they joined up, Norman and his brother, Leonard. They saw the lines around the theaters to see the 3D movies, and they thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could do a 3D comic book and have that kind of success? And they had made an arrangement with St. John Publishing prior to that, and they were coming out with 2D comics. So they did a practice page, a Three Stooges page. They showed it to St. John, and he flipped and he said, "I'm going to do all my comics in 3D." So he had a agreement to do Mighty Mouse. So he said the first one will be Mighty Mouse, and that's when they published that one. And Maurer and Kurik said, "Well, let's not go too fast." But St. John was sure it was going to be a big hit, which it was for the first one. But after the second and the third one, everybody had seen 3D and they were on to other stuff. So it plummeted. And St. John almost went bankrupt because he tried to corner the market. EC sued everybody who came out with a 3D comic book. There was a court case. It was actually took place in September 1953. So just after the 3D comic book started coming out. They lost the case. They bought the patent that hadn't expired yet, and they came out with a couple of their own comic books, but it was really too late by then.
But DC, why did they sue? Were they using DC characters, or is there a copyright or a patent infringement? Why?
Yeah, it was patent. EC is the one that sued. Yep. DC did some 3D comic books too. They weren't all that great with Superman and Batman, so they sold well. But EC, I think they like to sue people anyway. But they found a patent that hadn't expired, so they bought the patent. They couldn't sue, but the person that took the patent out originally was involved in the case, but it got thrown out because they couldn't prove anything.
Interesting. Now when you show, now it's going to be a technical question, because it still baffles me, and it may baffle other people. Well, they're probably all smarter than me, so but it's going to help me here. So now you showed how the layers. Oh,
yes.
I'm going back to the layers. Yeah, the layers. Now, the thing about that is, okay, so I'm not clear on how they got the 3D. What did they just off? How did they do that? You know,
they had these registration holes.
Yes.
And they have the 5 layers of acetate, which I'm not getting very good at. And so they just moved them a little bit to the left or right. And so this one would be the left image, and then they would move them and make the right image, and then they would print them. But that's how they did the registration.
That's the thing. So
they made a right eye view.
So they were both identical, except for the fact that they were moved over.
Right. So they had layers with the drawings that we showed.
Interesting.
But I can't get it.
No, I got it. I think that closes it for other people too. So there was no really extra art. Right. They didn't have to draw another cell, or another image. They just kind of.
Well, they did the original art or roughed it out, and then they had to redraw it, and they had to paint the back so that it wouldn't bleed through. And so, yes, they just moved the layers.
Any layer to give it, like I'll do it sideways to continue developing depth depending upon how the layer was moved. Well, thank you, because that was what I couldn't figure out, and I hope it helped other dumb people like me, because that should seem pretty obvious. But no, interesting, very very interesting. When did you start getting? I mean, I know you were taking pictures and everything. What's the first thing that grabbed you in 3D?
The first thing that grabbed me in 3D was a television broadcast of House of Wax in 2D, of course, but they had the original credits, and it said 3D photography, natural vision, and I thought, well, that's cool. That'd be great to see in 3D. So I was interested, and then I tried to pursue. I like movies anyway, so I tried to learn as much as I could about 3D. And then when I found out there were only about 50 3D comic books, I said, well, you know, I'm a fan, not a collector, but I could collect 50 comic books. But then there's 24 Walt Disney Cheerio pocket-sized books, and there's the original art, and then there's the Howdy Doody Fifth Avenue thing. So
Now, but how old were you then? By the time you started realizing, and go ahead.
in 1971 is when I realized there were 50 3D comic books, and so I said I can get those, and they weren't too expensive then. Some of them were. Batman and Superman were always too expensive, but I found them.
Did you ever see House of Wax in 3D before? You know, like because you saw it on TV, and obviously, now, did you ever find it there to show it in at that point?
Well, a friend of mine, Paul Adair, was a projectionist in Dallas, Texas, where I lived, and he had two synchronized, self-motored, synchronized 35 millimeter projectors in his garage, and he was restoring 3D movies. So I got to see House of Wax and several of other films, and in his garage.
Where did he go?
Well, he passed away a couple of years ago, but he was there in Dallas all that time.
And why did he decide to restore? Because that would have been when was the time frame? It was like mid 70s, 80s.
That was early 70s.
Wow.
He was a fan. He got to see 3D when it first came out, and then he became a projectionist, and he tried to collect the left and right 35 millimeter prints and piece them together. Some of his collection went to Bob Fermanack, which is now at the UCLA archive.
Wow, we owe it to the projectionist, huh? Wow, that's incredible. Now, Howdy Doody, where was that? Where were the original studios? Did that ever move to California, or was it a New York-based thing? Or
no, it was New York. It was started when TV started, and TV was definitely East Coast. When they had the full NBC network, it was only 6 stations that were on the East Coast, and they recorded Howdy Doody live. It was the first kids show, and it was on. Eventually, it was on Monday through Friday. It originally started 3 days a week, and then it went to Monday through Friday when they figured out how to schedule television. But it was there at Rockefeller Center, and then they had to
Studio 3H. But go ahead.
And then they had to make kinescopes and send them out to the West Coast for those people to see.
Do you know the history of Howdy Doody? Who actually wrote the series? Who invented Howdy Doody?
Buffalo Bob Smith had a radio show. He was a radio guy, and he had a character. Of course, he didn't have a puppet because it was radio. He didn't need a puppet, but he had a show on radio called the Triple B Ranch. Big Brother Bob, Buffalo Bob Smith is what he became on television. But he would have a kind of a hayseed character, Mortimer Snerd sounding guy, and say, Howdy Doody. His name was Elmer, but all the kids wanted to see Howdy Doody when they came to listen to the radio broadcast and then television. So they got a puppet.
And who wrote those shows?
Eddie Keene was the writer. He wrote for many years. He was a single writer. He wrote the shows. He wrote the songs. He was very prolific. He wrote the comic books. There were 2D comic books. But the songs, I think, is an amazing thing because there were a lot of songs. They had them on the TV show, and then they put out a little record album for all the kiddos. But,
what was it? What was the Howdy Doody song? That's Howdy Doody time. What was it? I'm gonna make a meme out of you, man. But anyway, no, I gotta hear it. I gotta hear it.
My wife is singing it in the other room. We should bring her in. It's Howdy Doody time. It's Howdy Doody time. Bob Smith and Howdy too. Say howdy do to you. Let's give a rousing cheer for Bob Smith is here, or Howdy Doody's here. Somebody's here. Let's start the done show.
We won Howdy. You are such a good sport, man. That was great. That was great. Yeah, so he wrote the songs too. That guy, man, whatever happened to his career? Where'd he go?
I think he made money writing and doing other stuff. I think he spent at least 8 years on Howdy Doody, and then he said, "Well, this is enough of that," because he would have to write a different episode every day.
Oh man.
and then finally it went to this Mickey Mouse Club started on ABC, and it kicked Howdy Doody over to Saturday mornings. So that's when Eddie Keane said, "Well, it's probably time for me to leave. See ya."
Nobody can win against the mouse, man. The mouse wins, and we all know that, and we all appreciate that. But you can't win against the mouse. That's amazing. Well, and now did if you know, did Disney do a show every day, or just did once a week? Because I wasn't a big.
He did a daily show Monday through Friday.
But I mean, Mickey Mouse show, was that daily
Mickey
also?
Mouse, yeah,
Oh,
that was
the end then. Sure.
The Mickey Mouse Club, and they had each day they had a different theme, and they had shows like the Hardy Boys and Annette, whatever Annette does.
Right.
Funicello.
And the guy. And the guy. What was it? Annette Funicello and there was another big Mickey Mouse. Well, there was a lot of people came out of Mickey Mouse, right?
But actually, it only went for 3 seasons, and then they did reruns. So.
Oh, that was.
But
brilliant.
at least they filmed it, unlike Howdy Doody, that was live. And once it was shown, it was gone.
Except for the kinescopes, right? They're around somewhere.
The kinescopes are around, not all of them, but a lot of them. And then they started taping them when it went to the Saturday morning because videotape had been perfected, invented.
And in terms of the career of Maurer, I forget his name again, the guy who started. Yes, what did he do afterwards?
Leonard's really the one that invented the 3D process and tried to patent it before EC sued, realized there was already a patent. But he's the one that did the promotional 3D items after 3D comic books. The other guys kind of stepped away. And so, and he did that for several years, but he was an attorney and an inventor, and he stayed very busy. He contacted Ray Zone towards the end of his life, and Ray interviewed him.
Oh, wow. Where's that interview?
Might even be on Ray's website, which has been resurrected by 3D Space. If you go to the LA 3D Club website, there's a link under member sites.
I think that'd be very interesting. Now that people know the background, because that is just that's fascinating. You know, that really is. And I guess now, so let's just take this history and let's get to the end of it then. So,
I don't want to get to the end ever.
I know. I realized how bad that sounded, but it was already out. You know, I couldn't suck it back in. I'll fix that in the edit. But so he lost to the mouse. We lost to the mouse. But the show stuck around, right? The show is still around.
Yeah, it finally in 1960. It was kind of expensive to produce, and it's funny they canceled it. NBC September 30th, 1960 was the last Howdy Doody TV show, and it was the replacement was Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, which was another puppet show, but it was Shari with
the sock.
Yeah. And it wasn't a puppet stage with marionettes and other actors and all this other stuff. It was a lot cheaper show to make. But by 1960, they were doing all cartoons. And once you bought the cartoon, you could show it for a billion years and it never cost you another penny. So.
Yeah, and of course the budget was better because it's Shari Lewis and a sock. You know,
yep.
New sock every week. You know, that was in the contract. You're going to get a new pair of socks every week. Sign on the bottom. And then you had Jerry Anderson and that whole thing, but that's another story entirely. Like, you know, the puppets, that kind of moved into storytelling with puppets. Because they were kind of moral stories, right? On Howdy Doody, right? There was a moral to the story.
Yeah, Howdy didn't have a gun. He didn't do anything bad. They teach you things through the songs of cross the street with your eyes. So look both ways before you cross the street. And when they invented the flubadub, which was 8 animals in one of the animals was the memory of an elephant. The flubadub liked to eat flowers. And all the mothers wrote in, "No, the kids are eating flowers." So all of a sudden, flubadub started liking spaghettis and meatball. So now
Franco-American, we had to get in there. There was the deal. SpaghettiOs. Did they have? And I got just the last thing. I'm sure it's probably dragging on a bit, but
As
Any
long as we're having
merchandising?
fun.
Yeah, well, lawyers have. Yeah, they always have fun. Um, so, were there any other merchandising deals with Howdy?
There
'Cause you-
was quite a few. Actually, originally, um, that was the problem. When they had the Howdy Doody puppet, they had what was called the ugly Howdy, because Frank Paris was the puppeteer, and he brought in this puppet he had that became Howdy Doody. And the show was an instant success, and there were other puppets too. But a few months in, NBC started saying, "Well, we're going to make money off of merchandising." And Frank Paris said, "Well, that's my puppet." So they said, "No, you signed an agreement. That's all ours." They kicked him out. Goodbye, ugly Howdy Doody. And they had to come up with another puppet really quick. But it was all because of merchandising. So NBC wanted to make some bucks. Buffalo Bob Smith was his attorney, came up with a company called Kagran, which the 3D art is copyright Kagran. So from about 48 to 55, all the 3D merchandising, and there was a lot. There were lunch boxes, there were costumes, comic books, coloring books. There was even a Sunday strip for Howdy Doody. So it was only in the Sunday newspaper. It wasn't in the daily newspaper. But there was a lot, and Buffalo Bob became really rich. And then when about mid-50s, when it went to the Saturday show, Bob Smith sold his rights, and now NBC owns Howdy Doody, and they don't want to make any money, or they can't make any money off Howdy Doody, so Howdy Doody is long forgotten.
So who does hold the rights at this point? And that's just...
it's still NBC. For a while, the Bozo guy, Larry Harmon, released some Howdy Doody replica stuff, and in the 70s and 80s, and there again there was another renaissance of Howdy Doody merchandise and puppets and things. I'm looking at all this Howdy Doody stuff around the room, but anyway, NBC owns the rights.
So it went from ugly Howdy Doody, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that guy, he must have spent. So he lost the rights to that, right? So that went now. Was it NBC or Buffalo Bob who inherited the rights?
It was an NBC show, but Buffalo Bob always said that he invented the character because he did, sort of.
Yeah, he did, because it was in radio. So the other guy, what was his name? The guy who with the ugly Howdy.
Frank Paris. He went
Frank.
on and did other television shows with marionettes, but never as successful as Howdy Doody was.
That's got to be a hard story, man, because here he had the thing. He had to spend the rest of his life looking for another Howdy, I wonder what his expression was when that happened. Let me go get plastered. No, that was. But you got to imagine, right? The guy makes this thing. It works. He gets screwed out of it, so he's got to be in the laboratory trying for the rest of his life, trying to make another thing that'll hit as good as that. Oh man. Well, I'm glad he had a happy career in the TV business. That's always complicated. Let's put it that way. And Buffalo Bob came back a little bit, right? Didn't he do something in the early 70s or something? Didn't they try to bring it back, rebrand it or something?
Yeah, there was an 80s television show they tried to syndicate, but it was kind of not the same. And they changed a few things and wasn't very successful. They had a 40th anniversary special. They invited all these stars to come on, and you can still buy that on video.
And how long did the 3D segment, like the stuff that they did in 3D with Howdy, what kind of lifespan was that? Was that right to 58 or 60, or when did the 3D product stop showing up?
That probably didn't last. The Ludens thing was just a one-off, and like I said, you can't find them really anymore. The Tribute strips by that time, Viewmaster had bought Tribute, and they weren't strips anymore. They made cards out of them. So I think Viewmaster had bought Tribute just to get the Disney. Here we go, Disney again. Disney merchandise. So that's what that was. And Storyview were much earlier.
And there are Viewmasters Viewmaster stereo. I'm sorry, I don't know more about it, but there must be Viewmaster Howdy Doodies, right? Or no?
I don't think so. I think it was just the tribute. First, it was the strips, and then it was the cards.
Well, the mouse don't like competition, man. That's just the way it is. Howdy anything, you're out, pal. That's the end of it. Sorry, your career's over. You'll never work in this. You'll never hang in this town again. You'll never. I don't know.
Yeah, Howdy was pretty much for the younger kids.
Yeah,
They grew up and moved on. So.
And how young were you when you started first watching Howdy? Or did you watch it initially?
Yeah, and actually probably had kind of gone by the time I was capable of figuring out what I liked. But I do remember I had some hand-me-down books and things from Howdy Doody that I would read for my brother.
Yeah,
and there were no reruns, so I had to watch Lone Ranger rerun.
And that's the last question I was going about the broadcast side of it. So you were in Houston, as we say here. No, Houston, right? So you were living in Houston when you watched
Dallas.
Howdy, and Dallas, same thing. You didn't laugh. I got it. Dallas. So okay. So you were in a major broadcast hub. I wonder, was that shown in all, like, I know it was going to be L.A., New York, but was that on all of the NBC affiliates, or?
Yeah, I think so. Eventually, they, especially by Saturday morning, so mid-50s when they had videotape, and they increased the network from 6 stations to all over the country. And Howdy Doody had a Canadian version, so it was similar characters, no Buffalo Bob, but they had a Howdy Doody in Canada, and then they had one in Mexico.
And so at that when early on, they were the first program in the afternoon. Were there any? Do you know of that anyway in terms of broadcast? So
there was nothing before, and they even had for a while they had a test pattern that had Howdy on it, rather than the Indian.
Rather than the Indian.
But yeah,
tough business, man. Tough business. You're out. Anyway,
it was like 5 in the afternoon. Nothing was on TV before that. TV was new. People had radio. They listened to the radio dramas and news. And when TV started coming out, that's the networks put their money on TV. It's to buy radio. They could make a lot more money off of TV. So that's and the day started getting longer.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of better questions than I asked, but and I'll stick around for part of that because I'm very, very curious of what people's take on this. So, thank you once again. Oh my God. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your knowledge. That was fantastic. I know that in terms of broadcast and everything, it really is incredible. Oh, you're a European guy. Actually, you guys in England, right? You had a test pattern. Well, we're on test patterns. Didn't you guys have Jack in the Box? A BBC was a Jack in the Box, I think. One day we'll do a show on test patterns. But, well, I think that's pretty much well it. Oh, well, here's a little detail. The Jimi Hendrix song, "The Wind Cries Mary," when he uses that line, "all the Jacks are in the boxes," he was living in England at that time, so it might be a connection. Well, for all you Jacks in the boxes, speaking of which, it's time for a test pattern for me. We're heading out. Thank you again. Thanks to the crew, the guests, contributors. Of course, thank you for joining us again this week. And join us again next week. And I'm going to, we got to get everybody doing this. I only thought of it today, so I'm going to give you a little time to get this right. You'll all say, "See what you've been missing in 3D." Because it's inspired by that Howdy Doody piece, because I think it's worth it. So we'll rehearse that next week. So see what you've been missing in 3D, and I'll see you after the after party. Howdy Heiser, you can let it go. Thank you.